So as you guys know, I'm kinda rich. Well, not really. I know there are lots, and I actually mean lots, of people who are way richer than me, but I'm still decently wealthy in Loomian Legacy, and I know a lot of people who also once were, but gradually dropped and quit trading because they lost too much value. Today I'm here to show you that trading isn't always just dominated by the richest, the best, the highest people, and that if you've already made your way even the slightest into getting decent, you're just this close from slowly getting richer. Before I continue though, I'd like to ask anyone interested to consider leaving a like and sharing this to other people you may know. I know YouTubers almost always ask people to do this before starting on with any video, but I can hand on heart say that this isn't just for my personal profit, it's also to allow beginners not to get shocked that easily and make the community better as a whole. With that aside, let's move on to the first tip. So the first tip I'm going to give you is just not to trade for stuff with bad demand, even if it may be an equal or a small win in value. So let me put the scenario in your head. I have a Gamma Isagul, which is 1.2 Gleam Roams on base value. You have a Gamma Zulong, which is 0.8 Gleam Roams on base value. Except mine is frail clever in nature and yours is pure nimble. So a lot of you would probably be thinking, even if the natures make a huge difference, surely 0.4 Gleam Roams, aka 20 Gammas, must compensate for it? Well, in some cases you might be right, and in some cases you might be wrong. And that's exactly what I'm here to talk about. A Gamma Isagul, how do you even pronounce that? Isagul? Isagul? I don't know. When paired with Frail, one of the worst possible natures, easily drops his value by 10 Gammas. A Gamma Zulong with the best possible nature, aka pure nimble, probably is enough to raise its value by the same amount. So when you compare the two, they should be around equal value, which for a lot of people would be enough of an incentive to do the trade, considering Isagul's base value is just so much higher. However, this is where a lot of people fall for it. You're not calculating this in terms of base value. The values of both of these Loomians have already been decided, and they're both more or less the same at 1 Gleam Roam. The only reason why doing this trade would be such a mistake, if you do happen to do it, is because people tend not to accept things with bad demand. Gamma Isagul itself has never really had amazing demand to begin with, and when paired with a terrible nature, in this case, Frail Clever, makes it even harder to trade off. The only way you would really be able to get it off your hands would be by underpricing it, by putting it so low that it gets to a point where the profit in value is enough to make others ignore the decrease in demand. The Gamma Zulong, on the other hand, has always had an okay-ish, I'd say above average demand, and when paired with the best possible nature, makes its demand skyrocket beyond imagination. It's due to this demand that many people would be willing to overpay more than what it originally should be. So let's say you tell me about this, letting me know that you see why doing this trade would be such a huge loss for you. But then here comes the more tricky part. 5 more Gammas along with the Gamma Isagul, theoretically making it my 1.1 Gleam Roam value for your 1.0. This is the part where you have to decide for yourself. How much of a value would they have to add for you to be able to ignore the loss in demand? An easy way to figure out would be to test this on other people. Find somebody who has something with similar demand and similar value as your Loomian, in this case being Gamma Zulong. Offer what I was offering and see if they would accept. If they would, there's your answer. It is worth it. But if they wouldn't, then you may want to consider either asking me to add more or just straight up declining the trade. It depends on what your personal preference is, really. I personally don't like to take risks, therefore if somebody offers me something with good value but terrible demand, I just almost always immediately decline, no questions asked. Unless of course they're doing something crazy, like overpaying by 1 Gleam Roam. But by the time something like that happens, I probably would want to reevaluate what the Loomian that I own that they want is worth to see if it rose higher than the value it was originally at, or see if the Loomian that he has actually received less hate overall and has actually had better demand. The second tip would be that if you're not sure whether or not a trade is a profit or a loss, or whether or not the Loomian you're receiving will drop in value or in demand, then just don't do the trade. This is a very common scenario that a lot of beginners fail to detect. Let's say I'm offering a new Gamma Event Loomian, whatever that might be, for something that you own. Due to the constant changes in value and demand, it would be difficult for me to come up with an example, so I'd rather just not do it here. As many old players will know, events tend to follow this graph both in value and demand, where a new rare Loomian starts off with demand higher than you could ever imagine, but with unknown value. Then, after a while, people slowly agree on a set value, with its demand being almost just as high as it originally started with, just not high enough to the point where people who own it would just refuse to trade it no matter what. Then, as the event gradually comes to an end, demand will drop drastically, its value going down along with it. The craziest example I've ever seen of this happening was the Gleam Ruby Geklo / Eliguana. When the event was going on, it was still at around 6 to 8 Gleam Roams, I'd say, depending on the nature and the ability, and whether or not it was a Geklo or an Eliguana. But as the event started to end, its demand and value all went straight down the hole, dropping and dropping until eventually coming to an end at 1 Gleam Roam, which is really crazy if you think about it. It went down so bad that it became 1/8 of what it originally was. But that doesn't mean you have to push away every single event that ever existed. No, just don't do that. A lot of examples have shown that after the drop, after all the hate and disgust, it will eventually start to rise again. The Gleam Ruby, the very thing that I just mentioned dropped like you've never seen before, is very slowly starting to rise once again. All the hate around it has calmed down a little bit, everything's just slowed down, and now it has slowly rose past 1.5 Gleam Roams. The best ones even reaching 2. So there is hope for events. Just be cautious when accepting trades that involve new events. And when you're unsure whether or not it will drop way more than it will rise, just don't do the trade. Not doing it will always be safer than doing it. Some risks simply aren't worth taking. If you take the trade, you risk losing lots and lots of value with a small chance that it will rise enough to compensate for your losses. There's also a chance that it won't drop at all and will rise so much that you'll become one of the richest players in the game. The Gleaming Santa Ragoon, for example, also known as the Grinch, went from 5 Gleam Roams right up to more than 50. The chances of that happening are much less now than they were in the past, because right now there are just so many more players and everything's just getting way more common. But that doesn't necessarily eliminate it as a possibility. However, if you do not take the trade at all, you might miss an awesome opportunity to get rich, perhaps, but you will most definitely also evade the fall. There is nothing stopping you from trading for it when its value drops, and there is also nothing stopping you from keeping what you currently have and play it safe, like I personally like to do. And final tip that I'm going to give you is to never, and I actually mean never, fully believe what your trade partner is saying about their Loomian. Always stick to your own opinion and ask others for theirs. This would really appear as common sense to a lot of people, but you'd be surprised by how it doesn't to many others. The person you're trading has every incentive to lie to you. They have every incentive to convince you to his or her best ability, to manipulate you into believing their false values. They will also try to paint whatever they're trading in the best possible light, and if that doesn't involve a nasty lie, it usually involves a clever play of words. I can easily think of a few examples right now, so instead of saying, "My Gleam Emerald Eliguana has okay value but disgusting demand, and if I trade you I will get something with much better demand," obviously don't say that to people if you're trying to convince them to do the trade. I would say something like, hey, this thing doesn't exactly have the best demand, but it has some pretty decent value and it might even rise in the future. Tell you what, I'll even add a couple of gammas just to compensate for its demand. I just really like your Gleam Duskin and I'll overpay for it if I have to. See how much more convincing that sounded? By telling them this, I've effectively tricked an inexperienced player into believing that my Gleam Emerald El Iguana is worth his Gleaming Dusket without actually saying it. I've been extremely vague, and I haven't actually provided him with any numbers or solid evidence, but since I sounded so nice and eager to overpay, they automatically assume that I'm offering something that's completely worth it, even when it's pretty much the polar opposite. Some people will do anything to get literal pixels on a screen. They'll do anything for it for some reason. There's just a lot of hate around people who do stuff like this, but they honestly value their own satisfaction over your opinion. If you're looking to go down that road to get rich, just don't tell people that I told you to do this, because I definitely haven't, am not, and never will. Just make sure not to trust these people. Always take their opinions with a grain of salt. So that pretty much wraps it up for the 3 tips on how to get rich in Loomian Legacy. Let me know what you guys thought of these tips in the comments down below, and please tell me if I missed anything important, because if I really have to, I will definitely make a part 2 to this. Remember to share this to any of your friends who are getting into Loomian Legacy trading, because it will most definitely help them with their journey. Hope you enjoyed, make sure to consider leaving a like and subscribing, and thanks for watching.